Welcome back to another Scope Creepers podcast. My name is Aarimous, and I'm excited because today I had a fabulous conversation with none other than Firebelley Games. Firebelley, also known as Jacob, is a full-time game developer who has been at it for about a year at this point, and if you have not checked out his YouTube channel, absolutely fabulous. I would highly recommend his most popular video of all time, which is talking about composition in Godot. It broke my brain when I watched it a couple years ago, and I've since watched it a few more times just to remind myself of maybe some better programming practices moving forward. But if you don't want to check that out, you should absolutely consider wishlisting his upcoming game, Alchemortis, which we talk a lot about as far as trying to use design constraints and to create art that I think looks absolutely breathtakingly amazing. We talk a lot about the process of being a full-time game developer and all of the other juicy good bits that comes with kind of being immersed in game development. And this just ends up being one of those conversations where I feel like I learned a lot. I saw a lot about like myself and my journey in the way he talked about it. And so I feel like this is such a good vibe check of just like some really cool conversations that I really think you'll find some value in. One of the things that comes up time and time again on this podcast is the act of learning and growth that happens in the beginning of any of these developers' journeys as game developers, which is why I'm excited to announce my very first sponsorship on this podcast is Brilliant, and I couldn't have thought of a better one to share with you. Brilliant is truly a brilliant platform with their amazing lineup of different creative paths you can go down. You can learn about the foundations of math or computer science or data, and one of the things that is really great about it is they have these little bite-sized courses, so you can work it into like a daily meditation where you sit down and you learn something for 10 minutes, and that could be at the start of the day, it could be a midday break in between watching Aarimous videos or podcasts I have, or it could be something you finish your day off with, and that's just such a good way to like get that creative momentum going behind you. And I think that these courses are such a great way to do just that. And if you want my recommended course, I would say you should start with the Programming with Python course, because Python and GDScript, which is Godot's native language, are basically the same thing. So starting with Programming with Python will give you that leg up to learning game development, and then maybe even check out the Computer Science Fundamentals course I was looking at. I think it'd be a great way to kind of get that really strong foundation. So when you start learning something hard like game development, you're not only better at learning because of Brilliant's awesome platform, but you also have the knowledge and capabilities to easily apply some of these foundational skills to game development. To learn for free on Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/scopecreepers or scan the QR code on screen right now, or there's even a link down in the description below. Brilliant also gives our viewers a 20% off the annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to everything on Brilliant. And again, a huge thank you to Brilliant for being the first sponsorship on Scope Creepers. Go check them out to help support the channel. And without further ado, let's dive into my conversation with Firebelley. So where I wanted to start is you've now been doing full-time game development for a year, right? About a year or exactly a year? How close are we to like your quote unquote like anniversary of when you started this?
Yeah, it's a year and a month just about.
Awesome. Congratulations. That's a long time. Like that's like a good chunk of change there to get to that point. Literally in money, but also in like just the time, that's a very long time. So where I wanted to start is just like, how has that year been for you? What are some of the things you've kind of learned or challenges you face as you look back at the last year?
Yeah, so, I mean, the number one thing is, if you just have a year to yourself where you're not answerable to an employer, the main challenge is just like being accountable to yourself and making sure that you're constantly working and delivering. And then there are other secondary challenges too, like my primary vehicle for marketing is my YouTube presence and other social media. So trying to manage that community, I've got people now asking when's the Discord server going to be up. So now I got to spin that up and get that going. But it's good, right? Because these are all just like, for lack of a better word, like marketing vectors. It's good to have a community, but also like keep people in the loop about what you're working on. So yeah, I think that's the hardest thing is just, you have to be very self-motivated. You have to manage all that stuff yourself. There's no one sitting above you, like giving you demands, so you have to kind of make demands of yourself and stick to those demands,
How have you felt about sitting there kind of being your manager and your only employee? Like, how has that, I guess the relationship is it could be a good term, right? Because it's like a self-relationship. How has that relationship been in your head between manager you and like doer you?
Yeah, I mean, it's It's fine. I mean, if I were to give myself a performance review, it'd be like you don't spend enough time doing like social media posts, right? And you don't spend
Sure.
enough time doing, YouTube videos. But, it's hard to manage because, you'll get into a mode where you're just like, I just want to work on the game and like go heads down. And I don't want to have to take a 1 hour break to like take a video of the game and edit it very nicely and post it to wherever. So I think like time management in terms of like balancing across all the different needs in order to have like an actual like business that's doing the marketing and the production
Yeah.
of the game, balancing all those needs is very tricky. But I think overall it's been fine. It's just one of those things. There's constant tension between what do you work on and what are you spending your focus on.
Is there any way you found to manage that tension better than other ways? Have you like tried out different project management styles for yourself, or like is there anything that's bubbled to the surface? Like I personally just like have a to-do list that's literally just like a list that I every day will kind of just add to and remove from, and I try to keep it less than like 6 so that it doesn't feel overwhelming. Is there anything that you've done in the last year that's been successful or not successful as far as like managing that tension?
I would say no. I would say like this has just been a problem in the back of my mind that I haven't really taken steps to address.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that, but not really. I mean, I think, I've been streaming quite regularly, so that's good because then I have constant recordings that I can just like, if I wanted to start, I could take like a 60-second clip of a stream and do a YouTube short of it, or take that clip and just post that short clip to, wherever. So I've got that constant content creation while I'm also working on the game. So I think maybe as I'm thinking about it now, maybe parallelization is a good way of doing it. Like if you can do multiple things using the same time, then it makes the work a lot easier, right? So if you're working on the game and recording you working on the game and talking into the mic, well, now you've got a YouTube short, now you've got maybe a YouTube video, but you've also added some commits to your repository and actually made progress on the game. So something to think about. Like I said, I haven't really done a deep dive into like how can I actually make this better, but I think parallelization might be a key part of that.
Yeah. I think one of the fun things for me is that I've been able to not care about trying to make it better. Like when I was on a team of people doing like professional development, like a lot of our effort was like, how do we communicate better? How do we organize our work better? How do we say if we're going to work on something for 2 weeks, we can actually get that thing done in 2 weeks? And like like a lot of the time and effort I feel like was spent trying to optimize, and it's actually been quite fun to kind of just like let go of all of that and kind of just like exist in this space. Do you think that's kind of the vibe? It sounds like maybe that's the vibe you're going with. Does that connect with you at all?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, just existing in this space, just trying to find what works while also not spending too much, an inordinate amount of effort on any one thing, except for I think the game probably needs to be like the primary effort, right? But if you can do like just exist in that space of just throw stuff up on social media whenever it's convenient to do so, or, it's, one of the benefits of just being like self-employed is you don't have to make yourself like subservient to some arbitrary process. You can tweak and just do things that fit with how you naturally work. And, I don't really feel a huge need to like hold myself to a very strict standard, but yeah.
Why do you think as you were talking there, I heard a clear prioritization. You very passively said clearly or defaultly like the game has to be the number one priority. Why is that? Let's dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to make a living making games. The YouTube channel is nice. If I can grow that revenue there, that's nice. I also make Udemy courses, which I know you know about, but maybe some of the people listening don't. That's where actually the bulk of my income is coming from.
Insanely
right
successful, I would say, too. That's like those Udemy courses have so many students, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, and that was shocking to me because the first course I made was when I was still fully employed, and so that was just extra money coming in. And I was like, wait a minute, I think if I managed the money carefully, I could actually like coast on this for a while. And but maybe we can get into that a little bit later. But
sure,
I don't want to just be a course instructor. I don't want to just be like a YouTube content creator. Like I don't want to be one of these YouTube game dev people who are mostly just making entertainment videos and like the YouTube is the primary output rather than the games. I want the game to be the primary output, with the YouTube being like a secondary marketing vehicle, right? And so obviously if I'm going to make the bulk of my money from games, the main focus has to be the game, right? And then everything kind of flows. Everything is driving as many game sales as possible. At least that's the way that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Why do you want game dev to be the main thing you do? Because like I agree with you, and I agree with like I want to be a game developer who makes YouTube videos. I don't want to be a YouTuber who makes games. Why is that distinction important for you?
Yeah, I mean the the very basic reason is I just don't like editing videos at all. It's not fun. Like if my job as a full-time content creator was just to pump out video content,
yeah,
I would be back into software engineering in a heartbeat. I would be like, nope, this isn't for me. But I think game dev, so I've always wanted to be self-employed. I've always liked the idea of just making my own money and being my own boss, the cliche.
Yeah.
And game development just seemed like, I had already built up this skill set in a variety of ways to work towards that. And it's something that I find incredibly enjoyable. So if I already have the skill set and I already enjoy doing it, then I might as well take a shot at making it a primary source of income. And that's the stage that I'm at right now. We'll see how it goes. But that's the primary reason. I'm not the kind of person that will say, like, it's always been my passion to make games. I think I'm generally a pretty entrepreneurial person. I've made several like SaaS apps before that I tried to sell just by myself, and they all flopped. But I just have that kind of drive where I want to make something that other people can buy that can fund my lifestyle, and whatever form that takes, great. But right now the focus is let's see if we can make game development that.
Looking back at those products that flopped, and I think I come from the same spot of like I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've had ideas for like different businesses, and I always got close enough where I'm like, ooh, if we wanted to go, the next step here is to hire lawyers and like to start like actually going down the path of investing our money into it. And I never did that until I got to games because it felt so easy. Looking back at those projects that flopped, what are some things you think you learned from those experiences that have helped you in this last year?
Yeah, so I mean, the big thing when you're building software is like MVP. You want to get to a minimum viable product for anyone that doesn't know what that acronym means. That's especially important in software because, the primary goal of building a commercial piece of software is to get sales, right? And I don't think people tend to think of games that way because they're more of an artistic medium. But when you're building an app, it's like the only reason you're doing it is to sell it to a business or to sell it to a customer, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to get to the point where the product is valuable enough that you can start charging for it. And that involves managing scope, right? This is the Scope Creepers podcast. So in business world, it's the same thing. It's all about managing scope. Do you really need X, Y, and Z feature, or can you just do it quick and dirty, put it up somewhere where people can throw their credit card down, and then can you drive some conversions to it? And that's the part, I think that's the main, well, maybe I'm being a little bit too generous when I say it's the main reason why these flopped, but one of the big reasons why they flopped is because there was really like very little marketing effort behind them. And that's because I just didn't know much about marketing, how to, set up Facebook ads or whatever to drive people to a landing page where then you try to drive the conversions and you offer the free trial. Like there's a whole almost science behind that I just never quite nailed down. But I think
these apps targeted at businesses or consumers?
We did. I worked on them sometimes with a friend of mine who's a UX designer, and we did a various number of experiments. We tried, direct sales to like small businesses. One of them was like a texting app where they could just sign up, pay a very low fee per month, and then they'd have the ability to text customers. So if you're talking about like a veterinary,
Twilio or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we did. We hooked into Twilio. We gave them their own number so they could have like real-time chats with their customers. Didn't ultimately pan out, but that was the idea. And there are products available for that, but the idea was to make it so cheap that these small businesses would not balk at the cost. We could just say, hey, it's $10 or $20 a month, easy.
Yeah.
But it didn't work. So
sure. It's interesting to, I guess, in comparison to like thinking of those apps to your target audience being, with games being players. Is there anything that feels different when you're like targeting that audience and trying to grow that, trying to grab those eyes? What feels different when you think about those two massively different audiences?
Yeah. I mean, I think are you talking in terms of like the marketing or just the appeal generally too?
Yeah. As you're like, I guess I'm thinking maybe it's too broad of a question, but just like end to end when you're building an app and you're like thinking through, okay, how do I attract from what you're building, how do I attract and like show the value proposition to the person who will be paying for it, you know?
Yeah. So I think with software, it's a lot easier because it's easier. It's still not easy, but it's easier because you can identify a need in the market and then say, okay, well, I just need to build an app that functions in this way and it fills that need, you know?
Sure.
But with game development, there's a highly subjective aspect to it, right? It's like you can put all the features you have planned in a game and it still could potentially not be fun because the fun of a game is not just stringing a bunch of features together. But a piece of software is basically like that. Like just string a bunch of features together in accordance with the client needs and you've got software. But with a game, it's like you can't just throw an inventory system and open world and like crafting and expect that to create a fun game. That's just systems, right? And so that's the big thing. And then I'm also learning with Alka Mortis right now that the visuals and the setting and the theme of the game actually make a huge impact into how appealing it is, which is not something that I put a whole lot of emphasis on in the past, but I'm learning now with Alka Mortis, like, oh, like people actually do want a very unique setting and theme and art style. And that actually does drive a huge amount of even the fun. I would say that Alka Mortis would not be as fun if it didn't have the themes that it does.
Yeah.
So I think that's the huge difference is really.
So if I'm boiling this down, it's like with a product that is positioned, you're solving problems for customers. And I worked at a startup company where I think we even had a texting part of our thing that hooked into Salesforce and stuff. And like we were solving problems for customers, right? There was a need, we'd get feedback, and we'd create features to solve those problems. There's not intrinsically a problem that you're solving with the game. Like you are presenting the problem maybe is the person is bored, and you're trying to give them an experience that makes them not feel bored, or gives them that reward, or makes them feel triumphant in a safe place where failure doesn't mean public humiliation or whatever it ends up being, right? Like, but that's not like an intrinsic. It's not a problem in the same way in my head. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's 100% right. It's the problems in your game are largely going to come from just vague feelings of like the game loop isn't quite working, or something's not balanced right, or all the pieces seem to be there, the loop seems to be there, but there's just something that's not clicking. It's a lot more amorphous, I would say. It's a lot harder to nail down what's wrong with a game when you're building it.
Right. You're like, with the texting app, you're like, did we make it cost effective? And does it work?
Right.
If I say send 1,000 texts out to these 1,000 numbers, did it do that thing or not? And like, that's a very tangible metric for success. You can say, okay, it costs us 2 cents per text. How do we get that down to half a cent per text, right? With that game, it is so much harder to find the vibe of what feels good. And I think it's interesting that you talked about the look and the marketability of looking at a game and seeing that, like, okay, that looks good. And like, I would say with Alka Mortis, it does have that attractiveness quality of that nice, interesting color palette of all this negative space that immediately pulls your eye to like the still like in palette, but it like pulls your eye nicely to these different points of interest on the screen, which I think is, I mean, as far as getting a Steam page up, like it looks attractive. And I have no idea what your game is about. And I'm like, I'm interested to like look at it more, which I think is cool.
Yeah, and that's the feedback. Like I mentioned, I do streams basically every day. And I do everything on the streams. I write the code, I do the art, I mean, I don't mean to say that I do all of the work on the streams. It's just that when I am working on the streams, I touch on all the different aspects of the game. And the comments that I've gotten from a lot of my regular viewers is just like, yeah, this game looks really good. It looks really interesting. Like, it's super intriguing. The art stands out. And it's like, that's feedback that I've never gotten on any game I've ever made previously, like, except for maybe like a few jam games here and there. But like the games that I've tried to sell and put up on Steam, like that response has not been there for any of the other games. So that's why I mentioned I'm learning right now that, oh wait, the theme and the presentation actually makes a huge difference into at least getting eyes on the game, which may seem obvious to some people watching, but it really wasn't that obvious to me, I'm afraid to say.
I don't think it's necessarily obvious, right? I think there's so much to game development that part is hard to nail down. And I think for me, that's the next 5,000 hours of learning is like, how do I take my ability? Because like I know I can make any game right now. Like if I have an idea, I've made enough projects. I wonder if you feel the same way. It's like I've made enough projects that I think I can figure out, or I know I can figure out how to put the pieces together to make the thing I want to make. Whether that's good or not, that's a different conversation. But like I know I can make any game given infinite time and infinite budget, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in the next 5,000 hours of how do I do that and then have that be a good game and have it be like a higher success on the Steam side of it. Is that the same sort of phase it sounds like maybe you're getting into with your game development career?
Yeah, I feel like that's the same exact thing. Like, I have the technicals down, and I feel like I've had the technicals down for a while, minus, like, art. Art is still something that I'm getting better at. Like, if you look at my pixel... So, Alchemortis, I did all the art myself.
Yeah.
So, if you look at my art from, like, 2 or 3 years ago, even for my previous game, Gunforged, you can see that there's a very obvious lack of sophistication that is now present to some extent in Alchemortis. And so I'm still learning, like, from the appeal side of things and the theme side of things, like getting better at art as a technical skill, but also as a creative skill. But from the standpoint of like building features and like making the game run and exporting to all the platforms, I've had that down for years at this point. It's just, yeah, I've been maybe in the stage that you're talking about for like years now, which is how do I actually take these skills and corral them into something that is worth purchasing and that people are going to spend, tens of hours on, if not hundreds of hours. And that's still something that's being figured out that can only really be figured out by just keep building stuff and keep trying. And yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Does any of that learning surprise you? Because I feel like I'm quite surprised that I think my technical ability to build games, like I figured out how I like to build games, and like that is like slowly leveling up and stuff like this. I'm trying, different types of things, procedural generation or data management things, tech trees. Like I'm trying these different things, but it's like I don't feel like I'm really progressing as fast as I was when I first started making games. And now it is literally just like how do I design and like come up with art that make the game good? And it's so much less like the technical side of making a game. Does any of that stuff surprise you? Or I guess like what surprised you in kind of this last year of learning stuff, or looking forward? What are you like interested in learning about, and that is kind of like surprising to you?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that surprised me is I wouldn't have considered myself an artist when I first started doing my own pixel art, and it definitely reflected the fact that I wasn't an artist when I first started.
I would objectively say Alchemortis looks like you hired an artist.
Really? Well, that's a great compliment. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear because it has been very difficult. But what I've learned, I think, just more broadly speaking, is I'm 30 years old now, which kind of surprises people to hear. I'll actually be 31 next month. But the reason I say that is because
now.
The reason I say that is because when I say, "Oh, I've done this for years," people are like, "How is this 24-year-old kid?" No, I've had like and I've been spending a lot of time on the technical side, but also like I've kind of settled into this mindset of like, yeah, anything worth doing, any skill worth developing, you kind of have to think on the order of years before you get proficient at it. And there's really no way around that other than just to dedicate years to learning it. And so that's the attitude I took when I first started doing pixel art seriously. I think like 3 or 4 years ago now, is like, I'm going to suck at first, but I'm going to have to really study this, really practice it. And hopefully, in accordance with all of the other skills that I've learned, I'll just get better at it over time. And even though I was expecting that to happen, I think I'm still surprised the extent to which I learned and how fast I learned, and the fact that it actually happened. Because there was still a part of me that's like, I don't know if I'm ever really going to be that great of an artist, but I think I'm starting to get to the point where I can actually feel proud of my art, and there's still lots to go. I'm not going to like rest on my laurels, but that has definitely surprised me. And yeah, I think I just have to take that kind of mindset to now, like game design and marketing. Like those are the next skills to get really proficient at. And then once all those pieces are in place, hopefully it becomes a little bit, not guaranteed, but a little bit more predictable in terms of releasing a game that will actually sell copies, right?
Yeah.
So I probably still have many, many years ahead of me. I hope not. I hope Alchemortis sells like 5 billion copies and I can just disappear into the sunset, but that's probably not going to happen. And
can you just do that? Like, just click that button that says do that, and then you'll be right.
But yeah, I'm not I'm nowhere near the end of like learning all the skills that you need to learn with game development, and it's going to be many more years from here on out to hone the remaining skills, I think.
I think it's cool how, like, it sounds, I mean, we're on the same page and probably at the similar states of our game development journey. It's cool to hear that, like, that artist ability kind of snuck up on you. It's like, only in looking back are you able to be like, oh, compared to what I made, oh my gosh, I've come so far. And, like, is there anything you can point to that feels like that clicked? Because, like, I think I was at that same place too with a lot of my artwork where I'm like, am I ever going to be good at this? Mm-hmm. And then I can, like, look and see, oh no, I have found styles and ways I like to make art that feel like an Aarimous style, that feels like my style. Have you kind of landed in that? And, like, I guess I asked you a bunch of questions there, but
yeah,
my question would be, have you found your style, and did it sneak up on you, or was there a day where you're like, this is my style, perfect?
I think it's definitely not something that I consciously work towards, but I have had people say, like, oh, it's the classic Firebelley pixel art style. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I see it. Like, there's a certain way, and it's not intentional. It's just like, there's a certain way that I approach pixel art. There's a certain way that I place the pixels that just kind of, for whatever reason, has like that Firebelley distinct style that doesn't look quite like any of the other pixel art that people are doing. And I would say other people have their own pixel art styles. You know, and I'm sure there have to be artists out there that can just emulate any style, and it's like, oh, that artist did this and that, and they look totally different. But a lot of my art, I'm kind of just like, you know, I'm learning art, but I'm also trying to stick to what I know at the same time. You know, I'm not trying to, like, completely ditch what I've learned and, like, try a whole new visual style, which is why I also don't do, like, vector art or, like, higher resolution art, because that's a whole different, maybe not a whole different skill set, but it's, you know, it's another skill to develop in terms of drawing a different style. So yeah, I think my style is just a combination of sticking to what I know while also, like, lightly pushing the boundaries to advance my skill. And again, that wasn't something that was intentional. It's just something that I settled into because of my workflow, because of what I've already learned. And
yeah, I think that's the hardest thing for me, was getting to art, is like finding my style, like finding, even like thinking of YouTube videos. Like, I think at first when I was starting off, it was like mimicry and like looking at things I liked and things that, like, creators I did liked, and like trying out the different things. And eventually I feel like I finally am like I found my voice on YouTube, and I found like some of the styles of things I'm interested in doing, and like different things like that. Do you feel that same way with YouTube and like finding your voice and like kind of along the creative lines, like kind of discovering who you want to be in these different mediums?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've definitely
settled in. What feels good to you? Not maybe who you want to be, like what feels good to you maybe is a better way of phrasing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I just, again, sticking to what I know, like with the YouTube videos in particular, like I've kind of found, you know, an editing and voiceover style that kind of, you know, I've had videos that have gotten many views with that style, and it's like, okay, that works. I don't need to shake the box and like go a totally different direction. I can just kind of hone what I have here because I know it works.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm already familiar with the workflows. I have all my editing tools in place. I know when I set out to write it, to make a video, I got to write the script, edit it over a couple of days, then record a bunch of B-roll footage. And I've got that down as a system now where it takes much less time to edit a video than maybe the first ones. And I think that's maybe the main thing that I've settled into. It's my voice, yes, but it's also like, I just don't want to add a bunch of extra work for myself by exploring a new style, you know?
Yeah.
It's just kind of like thinking of everything as a well-oiled content machine and just like pumping all these prerequisites through the machine to get the outputs, and just kind of like honing that machine and getting it as efficient as possible so I can free up my time to do things like actually building the game.
Yeah, I found I optimized for literally just efficiency.
Yeah,
and like,
and that's working well for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I can like make I think my last Friday video took me like 2 hours to record, like sit down, record, to publish. There's some time where I'm thinking about what I want to talk about and the framing and the angle and kind of how I want to position the idea. But like last Friday's video is 2 hours start to finish, and it has like 5,000 views at this point, which I don't think quite makes me like an hourly wage that's worth it. But then when it comes time to like, I'm getting some sponsorships now, those videos I can start being like, okay, now I can dedicate 5-8 hours to those videos. And then they feel really polished in comparison to those other videos, and they feel really good for me. So but I've like hyper optimized into, can I make this really quick so that I can just like put my thoughts out there and then move on with my life. And like, I don't, because I don't think for me, I want like same thing. I don't want to be a YouTuber who makes games. That means that YouTube just has to become this really like this kind of hobby project that could somehow generate some benefits for me maybe in the future, right? It's not necessarily like a huge profit center or anything like that for my studio.
Yeah, and I think that's smart if you can build the YouTube audience. You know, I think a lot of Gunforged sales came from people who just watched the devlogs and wanted to support me. Yeah. You know, I think a lot of people bought the game and basically like never played it, but it's like, it's still, you know, it's still a sale. So, and that wouldn't have happened if I had just launched the game with no YouTube presence at all. It probably wouldn't have sold anywhere near the copies that it did sell. And so I think it's, if you could just build an audience, give them some regular content that they enjoy watching, and then also point them, hey, here's my game, you know, or in your case, you know, I just released a new Hexagod, you know, build. Go and try it. I think that's super helpful.
Yeah. So looking back the last year of full-time dev, you've done a lot of different, you've spent your time doing a lot of different things. YouTube videos, YouTube streaming, Gunforge, Alchemortis, some game jams, Udemy courses, 2 Udemy courses in the last year, or...
I don't remember if it's...
Or did you have the first one done going into this?
I have 4 Udemy courses. I did end up finishing a C# course. I can't remember if that was prior to me starting full-time or if it happened just after me starting full-time, but it was around that time.
Okay.
And then, in this past year, I did take like a 2-month break where my main focus was getting the course recorded and edited and up on Udemy. And that's the most recent one.
So looking back at that time, how do you value all of that stuff? Are there things that you're like, that was a good investment, bad investment? You know, and different things I think in my head for me have different like values, not just intrinsically money values, right? Some of it is like, I enjoy making YouTube videos and sharing my process, but like, I know it's not maybe worth the time. Looking back at all those different buckets and projects you've done, how do you, as a business, are you like, I guess, how do you look back in that and like value that and like say that was a good or bad use of my time?
Yeah, so I think obviously like the Udemy courses, since that's still where a lot of my income is coming from, like great use of time. Now, does that mean that I want to spend the whole year making Udemy courses? No, it's like I'd like to, you know, if my monthly income is getting a little bit low, I'll build another course or create another course and then launch that, and that kind of elevates my monthly income for, you know, a little while after that. So it's like padding. It gives me runway, which is an important part of continuing to be able to do this. You know, I'm just running on what's in my savings going in and out every month, and it's like, that's it, you know. And if it goes to 0, it's time for me to get another full-time job. So the primary value is doing stuff that will prevent that number from getting to 0 while I'm building Alchemortis, right? So that's very valuable. And then in terms of like, finishing Gunforge, that was a good, you know, extra bit of money. And also it was good just to have that off my plate, because I spent like, that game was in development in some form for like 4 years. I redid it like 3 or 4 different times. Yeah. So finally getting that off my plate, getting it done after I had already published all these devlog videos about it, and like people thought it was coming, you know, I didn't want to abandon it.
Sure.
And I didn't want to abandon it for that reason, but also because I didn't want to abandon it. Like I wanted to finish it and get it done and say that, yes, I published this game. Mm-hmm. So that was a good use of time. And then, in terms of like the game jam stuff, I think the game jams are valuable. Number one, because they're interesting YouTube content. People like watching the jam devlog videos. Yeah. I would say almost more than they like watching the long running devlog series, because it's just like a one and done, kind of interesting. And there's an element of challenge to it, right? Like 48 hours. How did you create this game in 48 hours or 72 or 96 or whatever it is? And
you're good at them, so it seems even more impressive to see them and see the results that you can like, because people maybe don't see the 5 years of you working or however long you've been making games, right? They don't see the thousands of hours, and then just see you in 48 hours make something really impressive. And like, I mean, I find it impressive, and I know you have a depth of like experience, but it is like, it's cool to see you do something and have the final product be something that looks really good and fun.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's definitely valuable, and there's also value in it too. It's like it is useful to take breaks from your game every once in a while.
Yeah.
So like I think game jams are a great creative output when you just want to work on something different, but not get bogged down in like having too many side projects. So it's just like a nice time box period of time. You get to do something brand new. You get to just execute it, get a bunch of feedback. People leave nice comments. It feels really good. And then you can go back into your game sort of like reinvigorated, right?
Yeah.
But I will also say like game jams can be a good opportunity to experiment with ideas that you want to use in your full game.
Oh, yeah.
So I did this.
Sure.
I did this with my most recent for the GMTK Jam game, which was called Retro Mortis, which is one of the names that this Alchemortis was maybe going to be called, but I decided to use it for the Game Jam game. But I tested a bunch of like audio and sound effects ideas that I wanted to use in
sure.
Alchemortis.
Yeah.
And the namely being that I wanted to use like low sample rate audio with low bit rates to make it sound like a retro game.
Okay.
Like a 90s Diablo game that's like got these really crunchy sound effects, you know?
Sure.
And people love the sound effects. So I was like, okay, that was a great test. Like I've kind of play tested that approach to audio, and I feel confident now using that in Alchemortis, right?
Yeah. And it's nice because audio feels like it's like a hidden thing too. Like you didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you maybe as you're streaming it or something like that, you phrase it of like, I'm trying these things out and your audience it, but like it is also kind of hidden where someone can just be like the feedback you're going to get from raters who are not raters, raters.
Yeah,
people
yeah.
who are rating the game, or they're not going to be like, oh, they were focusing on audio. And so you get that kind of feedback that is more just like, it feels like they happened upon really liking the audio and they can raise their hands and say, hey, I like this a lot. Well done.
Yeah, exactly. And then also with the Game Jam game, I used a very similar color palette with like a lot of the negative space, like really dark colors, but some vibrant parts. And it's not the same color palette, but it's similar. And that was, again, just like a test. Like, do people like this kind of style? And yeah, people did. So it's like, yeah, I think game jams are great if you can execute them. They make good social media content. They make good excuses for different creative outputs. And then they also make good opportunities to test things that you want to try in your full game.
Yeah. I found, because I did like half of GMTK, kind of burned myself out midway through. And I feel like I did the same thing where like I'm making a game about a black hole, which is an incremental game. And what I was working on kind of was like, I'm like, if I had finished it, it would have pivoted into like an incremental type game with very similar art styles as a game about a black hole, just because my brain is so centered around that idea and thinking about that space. And I like that a lot of like using game jams as a way of basically augmenting and giving you a way to like test some stuff out before you spend a couple weeks implementing it in your main project.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really
How did you
cool.
come up with that, by the way? What made you decide to work on a game about a black hole?
A game about a black hole. I wanted to try to make a game that I could make in a set amount of hours, and seeing some of the success of like the incremental, like the really chill incremental games, not the idle games, like the game you pick up, play for 3 hours and never pick up again. That's the type of like, you know, old school online arcade game that I thought would be a perfect example of a game I could probably run really quickly and create on Steam. I always kind of think about it like a Game Jam Plus in my head. And I saw a game about digging a hole or whatever it's called, a game about a whatever. And I liked that title. And for the longest time in my stream, I have a $500 point reward on Twitch for feeding a black hole.
Okay.
Just to, in my head, I was like, throw your points away, whatever, and people will do it. And at some point, I always said, I was like, okay, at some point, I'll actually make a black hole on screen that'll pop up, and you can shoot a little ship into it, and then they'll watch the ship go into the black hole. Maybe the black hole will get bigger. And people loved throwing money into it, or not money, but throwing points into it, even if there was no visual effects. And so I think the combination of seeing that over the years, combined with like that kind of incremental space, I was like, there's probably something here that could be a very flat and minimalistic way of making that incremental game idea. And so then it was like 100 hours of exploring that space to find what I like and what I want to do. And now the last like 200 hours are kind of like production phase, and should probably have it ready, like Steam demo in the next couple weeks. Next Fest is in October, and then hopefully release in November is the current plan.
Very nice. Yeah. That's so another question for you is, has that been hard? I mean, you're working with a very tight timeline. So yeah, has that been rewarding? Is there value in having such a tight timeline? Like what have you gotten out of that?
The nice part about it is that the tight timeline makes certain ideas just throw them out. Like
Yeah.
if you're looking at how many hours I can spend, you're like, I could experiment with this, but that might cost us X, Y, and Z. And that might be that those hours might be just thrown away if I spend a week doing this thing. And that's certainly what I did on Hexagod. Looking back, it is spent a lot of time just like experimenting and exploring. And so basically using the time as a way to cut scope creep before it even becomes scope creep has been successful. I'm also partnering with somebody who his name is Thornady, and he worked on Click and Conquer and did the same sort of thing where he was like the marketing and kind of balance and design side, and then the dev dedicated 300 hours to it. They've sold over 100,000 at this point, and so he reached out and he's like, "Hey, I had him on the podcast and like we chatted and stuff, and like had really good vibes." And he's helping with same sort of thing with a game about a black hole. And what I really like about working with him is he developed basically a tech tree tool to like build the tech tree out. And so then my job has become basically implementing a bunch of mods that we can pull the levers on with the tech tree. And so the game and the data like have become super separated, and we just like upload a new data file, and we can have 5 different data files that we try out to see this balance, and like we can give those to people to play and then say, what do you feel about the balance? And then my job as a developer is literally just saying, okay, we want to add in a way where when you break an asteroid, it explodes and it destroys nearby asteroids as well.
Oh yeah.
And so then I can add mods to make that scale up and make more damage and make the chance for that to occur higher. And like, it's been a really interesting separation of like, church and state's not the best example, but in my head, it's like data and UI, which is what everyone's always said to do.
Yep.
So this feels like that in an extreme fashion because incremental games are basically just whatever the tech tree is.
Yeah.
Where like, I feel like a roguelike game does have data and stuff like that, but it feels different for me to have made a couple roguelikes. How do you feel about like that data separation, stuff like that in your games?
No, yeah, having your data separate from your logic is basically the ideal state. Now, the problem is this is something I struggled with as like a very early into my programming career is like I was super dogmatic. Like I want to do things absolutely right every single time. Like the systems all have to be there. I got to architect this big thing. And then it turns out you just waste a bunch of time building an overly complicated architecture that just like slows down development rather than aids it. And so the main sort of mindset change that's happened since I've been doing programming for a long time now, but the main mindset change that I've had is like, yeah, knowing your patterns and knowing that separating data from your UI and from your game logic, that's a good thing to keep in mind as an ideal state. But what you should be developing in the immediate term is whatever makes development on the game the easiest, right?
Yeah.
So if having the data separate makes your game much easier to iterate on, which it sounds like it does, then that's what you should do. Yeah. But if you're going to have like data where it's like once you've set it, it's done. Like you can just code a constant in your script file. You don't like with Godot. A lot of people are like, why don't you make that an export variable? It's because once I have the value down and I'm satisfied with it, it never has to change again. So why would I make it an export variable? I could just bake it into the script, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's important, but it's also important not to be dogmatic. It's like everything in your game should be in service of making the development as efficient and fun as possible. And only when it starts to become kind of a headache to work on a system, that's when you should think about re-architecting things. And, you know, especially with games, how rapidly they change. Like you could develop a system and then figure out it's not working, I got to change the system. Well, if you've built this whole architecture with like 5 different layers of abstraction, it's just going to be a nightmare to like rebuild all that. So just do it the simple way first, see if it works. And as your game grows and as your game sort of informs the technical needs that you have, then you can iteratively build things. And I think data separated from logic, it's an important ideal to keep in mind, but it doesn't mean that you should go all in on that right from the start. It's
100%.
It's on a case by case basis that you need to do that.
And this game didn't start that way. There was magic values all over the place. And like once I kind of nailed down the fact, like, is this game going to be something I even do? And I figured out that, this game is like an incremental game is the perfect opportunity to abstract out data into a tech tree. And that really defines the game. Like, I don't think there's maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot more games that I would make, like incremental games are probably the perfect example for that. At least for me at this time. It's so interesting to hear you coming to like some of the same conclusions I'm coming to of like, having hindsight and looking back at your systems that you want to invest more time in is perfect because in the moment you don't have hindsight. You don't know what's staying. You don't know what's sticking around. And so do it the stupidest, simplest way possible right now. And then if it ever becomes a problem, that's when you can invest more time in it. And like so many things are like, my clouds in Hexagod are not optimized. People are like, do a multi-mesh, do all these things. And like, I literally create like 500 clouds when the game starts. And it's perfectly fine because I don't move them or change them. There's shaders moving them around. I'm like, I could go in and do the multi-mesh stuff. And I had to do that for the incremental game. But like, it hasn't been a problem, so I'm not going to. I'm going to focus on making other things fun and like solving actual other problems.
I had a moment similar like this recently in Alchemortis development. I have like an overworld map that is kind of the main progression of the game. So every node that you visit on the map is a different upgrade opportunity. But anyway, there are little decorations on the map like trees and campfires and stuff. And getting that to be performant, because it's like the map is pretty big and there's like thousands of trees. And so getting that to be performant, not just from like, placing the trees on the tile map, but also just generating the data about where the tree should be placed. Was quite an ordeal, but I got it down to a reasonable time. But one problem that I'm having still is that there are a bunch of like hundreds or maybe even thousands of trees being generated so far away from any nodes that you could ever visit on the map. And I sat there thinking like, wait, this has to be a problem. Like I got to call all these trees or something. Like these are all being placed. And every effort that I took to prevent those trees from being placed just increased the amount of time it took to generate the map. So I was like, okay, I guess they're staying. I guess those are just going to be garbage trees that no one ever sees. But it's like, if it's fast enough to be acceptable and is not causing any problems, there's a part of me, like there's a perfectionist part of me that's like, ooh, that makes me cringe a little bit. But in reality, it's not a problem.
Shut up, make a game.
So it's like, I'm not going to burn hours on this trying to figure out how to remove some trees that no one's ever going to see. It's fine, move on. And maybe I'll revisit it later, but it's not causing any problems, so just leave it.
It is so hard to like quiet that voice, I've found.
Yeah.
Is there a strategy you've come up with to be like, hey, quiet now? We're like, there's more important, like, or is it maybe just even noticing that you're diving deep on that problem that like isn't really a problem other than those trees exist?
Yeah, so usually it's just like there's a tension between certain values. Like, do you want to spend the time fixing this, or is it okay? And that tension is usually resolved by just doing a quick investigation. So I took a stab at removing those useless trees, and it made the map generation take longer. And then at that point I was like, okay, well, this is going to be obviously quite an ordeal to get to work, and I have other things to build. So at that point I was able to make a better judgment, like, okay, it's fine for now. Like, I have it like in my backlog somewhere on my Kanban board that I should address that, but there are other things to do. And so it's one of those things where if it had taken 15 minutes to do, then I would have done it, right? Because I do like when everything works the way it should and there's no unexpected results and like the code is very nice, but there's a limit to that. It's a balancing of concerns like everything. There's always trade-offs to everything. And if the trade-off is you're going to shave 10 milliseconds off the map generation time after you spend 4 hours of work, it's like, yeah, I don't know about that one.
Probably not quite worth it. Yeah,
probably not.
If someone hates the game because the tech tree loads a little, or the overworld map loads a little bit slower, you're like, well, you didn't like the game to begin with.
Right. It's and I'm literally talking like shaving 10 milliseconds off. Like that's how
like literally
minuscule.
Like, this isn't worth it. Yeah. That's interesting. I love that idea that like game dev is such an illusion. Like, so many things I've ended up making and doing under the guise of like just doing it fast have been these stupid hacky solutions and like things that are not optimized, but they're like, oh, is that a shader? Like, no, that's just like 3 sprites I render, and they're like, I independently animate them to look that way, and they're like, oh, it could be a shader. I was like, certainly it could be.
Yeah.
So, like, that would take me more time than it'd be worth to me just like put them in and like the game's not performant, or like it's not causing performance issues yet, so I'm not going to go down making a shader at this point. Are there any illusions or tricks you've come across that you kind of like smirk at when you're like, it's not actually that complicated? It like looks complicated, but it has like a really simple, dumb solution.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are probably instances like that, but I don't know if I've just baked that so much. Okay, I have a perfect example. So I have screen shake that happens in Alchemortis, obviously. Yeah. But the thing is, a lot of the game of Alchemortis, like the moment-to-moment combat, takes place in like a series of UI layers, which are not like subject to the view of a camera. So I needed to actually shake the whole UI to simulate, like a camera being shaken. But the problem is that if it shakes enough, you'll see like where the UI ends, like the UI clips, and then you'll see the background color. Yeah. So I was like, how am I going to fix this? I just literally slapped a color rectangle in the area behind the UI that's the same color as like the border color on the UI. So when the UI shakes, it just looks like it extends further out past the screen. Perfect. And it's like, it's just a color rectangle sitting there just providing a color. It doesn't do anything.
It's just elegant.
Yeah. And it's like, it's those things can feel hacky. I certainly feel like a part of me that's like, oh, that's like a little bit.
There has to be a better way. You're like, yeah. Is there? Like, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And so it's like little things like that, and I accomplish a lot of my animations with shaders, and Alchemortis, I'm actually very heavily using just like noise shaders of various kinds. And everyone's like, oh, how did you do that effect? It's like, it's just Perlin noise sampling. That's all it is. It's just scroll the noise texture over a certain amount of time with a shader, and it doesn't get more simple than that, really, as far as shaders go.
Are you just using like some sort of reusable shader that you tweak the values of when you're doing that animation, or are you writing like custom shaders each time?
Yeah, unfortunately, because of the scene tree layout, it's like some of them are screen shaders, some of them are canvas group shaders, and then some of them are individual sprite shaders, and those can't all be the same shader for a variety of reasons. So I have very similar functionality scattered across like 12 different shader files. Yeah. And again, that's the thing that makes me feel like, ugh, man, I don't like that at all. But again, it's all about getting it to work. And if I have to, there's the big rule in code, don't repeat yourself, right? Dry up your code. But again, it's like, if drying up your code requires creating this monstrosity, and it's just like, just keep them separate. Yeah, the noise function looks very similar across all the separate shaders. But again, once I set it, it's a forget it situation. Like, I'm not going to go in and tweak those after I'm satisfied with the effect,
Even if you do, and say it balloons to 50 shaders, and you're like, ah, shit, I need to change how this works across 50 of them. And it might be even like half of them, right? Maybe takes you an hour or 5 minutes of boring copy pasting, and you've got it good, right? Like, instead of like spending 2 days optimizing, trying to find one shader to rule them all, like I think that's the thing that like I always got to catch myself doing. I'm like, I want to do it this technical, really cool way that's really reusable and whatever, but I'm like, the alternative is it takes me it's not even like that long. It's like 5 minutes to manually copy paste this thing 5 times and have it just like be some kind of horrendous if statement that is not even that bad. And like the opposite is like something really complicated that takes me hours, or 5 minutes of like copy paste and like click, 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 click. And like, that's boring and unfun, but it's like, that's so fast compared to the opposite. And like, it's easily maintainable too.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I think that applies to all kinds of things, especially like when you're writing code. I've had instances where I'm like, oh, there's 1,000 elements in this array. Should I like map it to a dictionary so the lookup is super fast? And like, it's 1,000 elements. A modern computer is going to be able to find whatever element without any noticeable impact on the frame rate. So it's like, there's, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Like, there's a time and place to be dogmatic about things, but I think those times and places are fewer and far between than most people realize. Like, you can just do things the quick and dirty way. You can iterate over an array that's not optimized for what you're looking for. And you're probably, in like 99% of cases, you're not going to notice a difference between the optimized version and the unoptimized version. And I also take this approach with like memory. People on my streams will sometimes comment, doesn't that use a lot of memory? It's like, I don't care.
Maybe.
like if Alchemortis uses 300 megabytes and I could shave that down to 200 megabytes, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, it's 300 megabytes. Most systems, even on phones, have like 8 gigs of RAM. Yeah. 100 megabyte savings is not going to make any appreciable difference whatsoever in the user experience or the player experience of the game. So it's like, If it's easier to do it in the unoptimized way, just do that. It's fine. It's most likely fine, with a little asterisk that some cases may differ.
But then those come up, and then you deal with them, and you give them the time they need when they become a problem. And I think that's such a important thing to get across to people, is like, we don't have to build technical marvels. We're not in the 80s where we have to come up with art that is like perfect for the Game Boy Advance or Color, whatever, so that like you only get 2 colors, so be careful which 2 colors you like. Our memory is so big that virtually it's infinite for what we're doing, that like I feel so grateful to be in that position where I don't have to like use any, like, I really don't do any algorithm work. Like, I'm making algorithms in the way that I'm like doing structural data in my functions and stuff, but I'm not like using dynamic programming and like trying to solve the traveling salesman problem in O of log n or whatever bullshit, right? Like, that has never come up. I've never been like, what's the what's the time complexity of this function? Like, it just hasn't been a thing I've dealt with. Do you ever do like crazy algorithms or work like that, or is it much more kind of just like straightforward programming? Yeah,
the only 2 places where I actually had to pay attention to the algorithms I was using was in the map generation for placing all the trees and stuff, because there's like a bunch of like Poisson disk sampling going on, and then I got to chunk it into grids, so like it's not doing so many iterations, because again, if placing thousands of trees, but also the trees are placed in accordance with a noise function, so noise has to be sampled first to determine if a tree needs to be placed, then that needs to be placed on the tile map. And so there's a naive way of doing that, which literally takes like 13 seconds on my PC with like a 5 gigahertz processor. That's totally unacceptable, right?
No one's waiting 13 seconds for anything.
Right. So I definitely had to come up with a better algorithm for that. And then also I'm using an algorithm called wave function collapse for generating my enemy boards, which is more of a gameplay algorithm. It's not like for optimization. It's just I needed a certain result that presented dynamic enemy boards to the player to fight. And the best way to do that was with wave function collapse. But beyond that, like, everything is, like you said, straightforward. It's just like make the logic work the way that it needs to work. There's no time complexity. Everything's basically O1 time complexity, because you're like just doing linear operations. So it's like, I don't put very much thought into that at all, except when it becomes a problem, like in the case of my initial naive map generation. Yeah.
But you went into that saying, let me just do it the naive way possible, to like see. You maybe even knew going into it that it's going to take some time to like process this, but like there's a thought of like, let me just see how this feels and looks to see if it's even worth investing more time into it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, especially if you don't know how it's going to turn out, just you're gonna spin your wheels trying to come up with the optimal way, only to find out, oh wait, I don't actually like how that works, or that's the risk anyway.
And the other thing I would note to people is like, it's okay if you enjoy that as well. Like, depending on why you're making games, like you and I are both here to try to make like games that are profitable, and that inherently means how much time we put in is a part of that function. Yeah. But if it's just a hobby of yours and you really love making performant code and making those systems that are really technically savvy, or you're just exploring game development and you want to try out different types of procedure generation like the wave collapse and stuff like that, like, it is also okay to really just spend your time trying to make your technical marvel because you enjoy doing that. Like, you and I are coming from a position where like, oh, parts of our brain like that, but that is also really time expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What advice would you give to people who are maybe in that first 100 hours or 1,000 hours of getting into game development?
Yeah, I mean, there's advice for several different groups of people, I think. So the absolute beginner, I think a lot of people, I see a lot of this online, especially as like a course instructor with a lot of new students or students that are new to game development. I tend to see a lot of despair, like people like, this is so hard. I've gone through the lesson 3 times and I don't understand it. And I think part of that, is a framing issue. I would almost frame it as like, yeah, you should expect to hit those walls. Like, expect and be ready to hit walls while you're learning something as complex as game dev, and just give yourself the patience to like sit there and work through one problem. You might get stuck for a couple hours, and like, that's okay. Like, that's totally normal. When I first started development on games when I was like 14 years old, those moments were plentiful. Like, I would just get like one line of code done and then it doesn't work, and I spend the next 3 hours like frustrated. Why isn't this working? And I think what I would tell myself at at that stage is like, yeah, that's normal. Like, just give yourself the patience, the breathing room, take a break if you need to. But like, those things are going to happen. It's a natural consequence of learning anything that's complex.
Yeah.
And you'll get it eventually. And you just need to have the patience with yourself to do that. So I think that's, for absolute beginners, that's like I think the most important piece of advice I could give. But then, yeah, I think that's just generally applicable. Like, yeah, take the time to know what you're doing, to learn why you're doing the things. If you need to study other people's code for why it works, if you need to hop on a call with somebody, there's all kinds of game dev communities now where you can just find somebody who has expertise, who is gracious enough to give you the time to walk you through something. And there are no shortage of people like that, especially in the Godot community. So yeah, utilize the resources available to you. I mean, you could even use the LLMs. The LLMs are great as like interactive rubber ducks. Be like, I did this when I was doing the wave function collapse because I was trying to understand the algorithm. And I was like, I don't understand why this is working this way.
Sure.
And then the AI goes, okay, well, it has to work this way because X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, okay, I get it now,
Yeah.
So yeah, utilize the tools available to you, have patience with yourself, and it's a long road. I said earlier, it's like you have to be thinking on the order of years if you want to get proficient at game development. So just have some patience, and as long as you consistently put in the effort, you're going to improve.
Have some patience and document your games as you go so you can look back at them and see how far you've come.
Yeah.
Like, my itch page is full of my old projects. I love looking back at how shitty those games were. Like, but they all mean something to me. They're all like special little things where, oh, here's where I learned that thing, or here's where I focus on these. And I really love that. I love this question is, what was your first game you made?
So the first game I made, I wish I still had it. I have the overwhelming majority of games that I've made since I was 14 years old, which is really cool. But I don't have
number at.
Oh, I don't know. I have dozens of like half-finished Game Maker projects from years past, and all the games on my itch.io page, you can see all those. Those are just the ones I published. I've got all kinds of unfinished projects in Godot. I would not be surprised if it's like 75 plus game projects over for over 16 years basically.
Yeah.
And
you've been making games for half your life at this point.
Basically, yeah.
That's so cool.
Don't make me feel old.
I'm saying that's a cool thing. Not I hope you can look at it positively too.
No, it's cool. I actually like being old, so that's a contrary opinion. But anyway, I'm sorry. What was that? First game. Yeah. So I remember it was Game Maker 7 or Game Maker 8, and I was just doing it with the drag and drop functionality for those people who remember Game Maker out there. And it was just like this really simple. It was a single screen. You played as this teddy bear that shot little bullets at other like evil teddy bears, and like when the bullet collided with a teddy bear, it would die. And like it was just like an endless wave thing. So they just kept coming faster and faster, and you ultimately just died every time because there was no way to beat the game.
Yeah.
That was like the first game I ever made.
It's shockingly similar to my first game where I was like, you had to shoot little viruses that were coming to steal the keys for the network or whatever. Like, I think that's like such a good starting point for most games, is something that shoots something and you move around the screen and you're good to go.
Yeah, and that's something that I could throw together in like less than a half hour in Godot today, probably 15 minutes. But
it took me like, I remember it took me like, it was for the GMTK 2020 Game Jam. It took me a whole weekend to do that.
Yeah, because there's just so many skills that maybe you don't realize going into it. Like you have to manage game state on a frame-by-frame basis, which is just a totally different way of thinking compared to like traditional software development, which is just like stateful. Like nothing in the software changes until you initiate a change.
Buzz, you're like, cool.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But you got to manage the frame by frame state changes and like the scaling of difficulty over time, and you got to detect collisions and handle what happens when a collision happens, and what happens when a bullet hits two teddy bears in the same frame. Like, do you handle just one of those collisions, or do you handle both of them, just kill both of them at the same time? So it's like it's a very, very simple project, but to a beginner, there's just so much foundational knowledge baked into that kind of game that you have to work through and get experience with. And so, yeah, it goes back to what I was saying. You just have to have patience with yourself when you're doing that stuff.
Makes sense. That's a hard thing to do in that moment, though, too, to be like, I just want it to work. And you're like, well, you have to figure out how to make it work first.
Especially when you're 14. Like, you don't necessarily have the emotional maturity to realize what's happening.
Oh, absolutely. What is one of the best pieces of advice that you've gotten that you actually used? This could be life advice or game dev advice, and just a piece of advice that you actually, took and kind of took to heart and used?
I don't know necessarily if it's advice that I've been given, but something I've discovered. Well, I guess there's two things that I can mention.
What advice you gave yourself then, maybe?
Yeah, well, yeah, something that I've learned. I wish I had like game dev mentors giving me advice, but for game dev, I think the thing that I'm really settling on is like the North Star piece of advice is like, if you voluntarily adopt constraints, your creative output is going to be so much better. So instead of having like a limitless realm of opportunity that's just like pure chaos, you're doing this with a game about a black hole. You're giving yourself a very tight deadline, which is what you said. It's so helpful. It just automatically prunes all the useless stuff, right? Like you can't go off in random directions. But with pixel art, this is where I really started to internalize this, like this advice, I guess you could say, is like, when you're working with however many 16 million colors or whatever you have when you're drawing pixel art, it's really hard to do things, or it's really easy to do things wrong, because you're like, my art doesn't look good. Is it because I chose the wrong colors? What happens if I slightly change the shade of brown instead? Yeah. But if you start even with just like a 1-bit palette, which is incredibly restrictive, right? Black and white, you'll be surprised at how much faster you'll actually learn the fundamentals of pixel art just like using those two colors. Stuff like that. Yeah, because you learn the value of like the form of things and how to present the form, and you learn the value of the placement of individual pixels and how to use negative space to convey like different objects that are part of the sprite. And it's the same is true with game development. Game jam games, I think a good piece of advice is like nail down one mechanic and then just squeeze as much out of that single mechanic as possible. Yeah. I think the original Mario game did this. It's like you just jump. Like that's the entire game. It's for combat, it's for dodging things, it's for navigating the world, right?
Did it auto run to the right? Was it literally just jumping? Like the original Mario?
No, I think there's also, I don't know. I haven't played the original Mario, so but I think we all know that it's relatively not complex, right? It's just, but they squeeze so much out of just those simple controls. And so, I think constraints breed creativity. If you can voluntarily adopt constraints and rigidly adhere to them, I think you'd be surprised at how much your creative output improves just by doing that.
What are the constraints you've put on Alchemortis?
Yeah, so the main one is the 8-color palette. There's only 8 colors in the entire palette, and I also have a rule that every pixel that gets rendered to the screen has to be one of those 8 colors, which means that there's no transparency, there's no mixing of colors. Like every single color, whether it's the result of a shader or just the direct, drawing of the sprite, has to be one of those 8 colors.
Did you make the palette, or did you find the palette?
No, I got the palette from Low Spec, which is a great resource for palettes.
Low Spec. That's where I usually find my palettes too.
Yeah, and I'm not quite at the stage where I feel comfortable choosing my own colors. That's something I got to get better at. But I choose a palette that looks good. I usually just look at the example art on Low Spec and like, oh, that looks good. I know that this palette can create good art. So now it's up to me to use that palette to do the same.
I think getting a palette is my one big tip to like making art that looks good. Is just using a color palette and sticking to, like, it helps so much. Or finding a game and taking like a game about a black hole is using some of the similar colors from Glyphica, like Survivor or something. It's like a typing like defense game where you have to like type things, but I love the color palette of it, and it has this like that really kind of muted background with kind of some nice stark colors on it. And doing that is a really good way to like, if you like it, then take that color palette and start using that, and like you can build and adjust off of it. But I love the idea of like that really tight constraint for you to then like produce creative art in it. Are there any other constraints you put on the project? I should put more constraints on the project, but I have I'm going to be launching the playtest next week. That was a very hard deadline that I set for myself, which again just puts things in focus. So deadlines are great constraints. I think just because you're working for yourself doesn't necessarily mean that you should just have no obligations, right? Like because it doesn't sound like it does, but having that constraint, like a deadline, it really does improve just the quality of the output. It improves your focus, makes you actually reckon with what is important to add and what's not important to add. Like even just getting this play test ready for next week, there's all kinds of stuff that I've just been like, okay, that goes on the back burner because I'm not going to do that for the play test. Right. I'm satisfied with how the game plays right now.
I'll make like little improvements here and there up until the playtest release, but I'm not going to start a new feature. I'm not going to do all these different, things. I just want to see the game as is. What do people say about it? And then from that point, I'll probably set another deadline for the next playtest and then come up with a list of features or improvements that I want to have for that. And then I'll just repeat that until the release date. And then as I'm sure as the game develops, I'll be able to set a release date that I can be confident in. But yeah, I think release dates, limited color palettes, even like, limited game design, like I think my game's core mechanics are there and they're not really going to change. The stuff that's going to be added is just supplementary content and, supporting systems. But for the most part, like this is the game. Like it's an auto battler where you make cards synergize with each other and that's the entire mechanic.
Yeah. Cool. I really like that cleanness of that idea, and having that at this point is really helpful for like the future of the project, right? Like,
yeah.
I feel like you're going to be in a really good state. I hope you're in a good state based off of getting that feedback and stuff like that to learn something more about the game and like keep that momentum going. Because it seems like you have a lot of momentum behind you with this project.
It does feel. I mean, that's the thing. It's like I feel like this game has more potential and just more going for it than any game I've ever made before. Like I didn't even have this feeling with Gunforged or anything prior to it, but like something about this game is like, I'm actually having fun playing my own game. I don't dread doing play tests, which I think maybe is a signal I should have listened for with my previous games. Like if I don't like playing it, maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with it. But I don't have that feeling with Alka Mortis. Like I genuinely enjoy like going in and trying to like create broken builds and stuff. And I've surprised myself several times with some of the ridiculous combinations that I've created during my runs. And I'm like, okay, there's something here that I didn't necessarily intend to be there, which sounds kind of bad, but like there's just like all the pieces just came together in the way that just makes it really exciting and have a lot of potential. And yeah, I'm happy to hoping that continues for sure.
Especially with roguelikes, it's your job as a developer is to build the tools for broken builds to occur.
Yep.
And like that's such a good sign if you can play the game. Like I've had a hard time playing roguelikes that I build myself because I'm like, oh, I know combinations that I've intended there to be, but it's the unintended combinations that are almost the best part of a roguelike.
Yep.
One of the really interesting things about working with somebody else who is doing more of the balancing side of a game about a black hole is for the first time ever, like last week he sent me a file and said, hey, check this out. I want feedback on how I balance this tree. And it was so weird to play a game that was balanced by somebody else. And like, it's my game, right? Basically I built the engine of the game to render all of that. But like I was able to play my game and like give him actual feedback as a player of saying, oh, in this version, I felt slow and it felt like a slog because money was more precious because upgrade costs were high. I had to sit there and read through all the upgrades to choose what I wanted. And he gave me a different build where resource costs and upgrade costs the values were less, but also the cost was less. And I was able to just like click and like get upgrades and go. And it felt so much more fun and visceral to not have to sit there and like puzzly think about what I want to do, which is not the goal of an incremental game for what I'm trying to build. I don't want to build a game that is thinky. I want to build a game that is like, I feel like a power fantasy. I want to like click thing, become more powerful, get more money, go get more upgrade. And like, I want that loop to be really easy and seamless. And so it's so interesting to play something that somebody else had balanced. And I wonder if that's something I could try to do for a roguelike in the future, of like having somebody else give me like values for things to just see how I would be able to play it differently. Like if someone could balance Hexagod and then I would be able to like, I'd probably learn something different, I think, from that perspective.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting idea. I wonder how that would work for other projects. You could almost build a system where you could invite people to tweak things for you. But I think there's a way to emulate it when you're just working by yourself too. Yeah. One trick that you can do, or that I've done at least in the past, is like go in and just radically alter the numbers. Like just kind of haphazardly be like, I'm doubling this value, having this value. I'm going to reduce the resource cost of this. I'm going to make this more common. And don't do like little tweaks like, oh, you made it 5% more common. Like make it 50% more common. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then you can play the game like that, and it's probably going to be very broken and unbalanced. But what can happen in those situations is that something new gets revealed, like a way of playing the game that's so much more fun can reveal itself. And then you can be like, okay, now how do I get this game back into a state of balance while still preserving that new thing that appeared that is super fun.
Kind of like what I said with the 2 different resource costs for upgrades showed me, the extremes. I hated this extreme because I had to, as a player, I had to think in this mode versus the kind of run free and just get upgrades because I can afford so many more.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective of like, even in a roguelike, ramp up the values and ramp down the values and see like scarcity in roguelikes can become a really powerful mechanic to make you have to sit there and think about decisions where, in other games, scarcity doesn't feel good and scarcity sucks and it's annoying. Like, if you were in Minecraft and you're mining and it took forever to find coal in the ground, that would suck. But if you ramp that value up, now you've maybe found the point at which coal is plentiful enough that it feels fun to find when you're first mining through.
Yeah. And like in the Minecraft example, it can have all kinds of secondary effects. Like, now that people have more coal, they're less afraid to just waste it on like different experiments or just crafting different blocks, and like it just can unlock so much more downstream of that too.
Absolutely, that's an interesting way to. I like that idea, that way to like trick yourself into balancing stuff, which is cool. One of the things I'm excited about with a game about a black hole in the data layer of it all is that I want to be able to give players like 3 or 4 different ways of playing the game to see which ones they connect with as far as feedback goes. Is that something you've considered at all with like playtesting, or is it just going to be like version A and then we'll make some changes and now we'll get playtesting on version B? Like, what is your strategy for Alchemortis, like for getting feedback and kind of iterating on that?
Yeah, I think I have some experimentation lined up that I want to do. I'm not going to make it like an option in the build. I'll just say like, okay, I've pushed a new build with like this new feature and it may go away depending on feedback.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm thinking about it. I think just generally from a game design perspective, I'm already trying to support all kinds of different play styles. Like, for example, you could go full damage build or you could just do full defensive. And the thing about full defensive is that there's a mechanic in the game that prevents the combats from dragging on too long. So the enemy will just start like decaying and die after a certain amount of turns. And then what that means is that you could just build up a bunch of shield and heal yourself. And just like you could just sit there and
play.
Yeah, and you could just sit there and let the enemy die by themselves while you're just topped off. And so I'm trying to support just naturally multiple different ways of playing the game just from the design. But when it comes to more like experimental features or doing radical number changes, I'm definitely going to do those with a play test just to see how it feels. And then hopefully people who played the earlier play tests will also play the new ones, and then they'll be able to offer their feedback about what felt good about the prior version, what feels good about the new version. And then, then I can kind of like piece together things from that. But that's something, speaking of learning, I'm still learning how to like collect feedback and act on it. So I'm not like an authority on how you should collect feedback, but that's how I'm thinking about it, at least.
I'm just interested to hear how people's perspectives and thoughts on on feedback is, because I go through phases where I both like and hate feedback, and like I'm either in the right mindset to get feedback or not in the right mindset. And sometimes it's like, I see like constructive feedback, I'm like, oh yeah, that's really good, that's smart, whatever. And sometimes I'm like, nah, screw you, you're an idiot. I'm like, I don't know how to like necessarily like manage that. And I think the big thing I do is just like opt into seeing the feedback when I want to see it, and other times like kind of let it just be until I'm ready to like mentally get the feedback.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you definitely have to have somewhat of a healthy ego. I think you have to be able to know, like, that piece of feedback, they don't like the game, whatever, the game's not for them. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody came along and said, I don't like the art style of Alchemortis, I'd be like, I guess you're not buying it then. Like, I'm not gonna... Now, if they have a piece like, okay, like this piece of art specifically looks weird to me, then I might say,
out.
I may go in and redo that. I've already done that several times on Steam, or not Steam, Stream. People will say that looks really weird, and I might get a little bit annoyed, just like the natural human reaction. But if I just actually look at it, I might be like, yeah, it does look kind of weird. Like, I spent an hour drawing it and it still looks weird, but I can't let that stand, so I'm gonna have to go and fix it. You know what I mean? But yeah, there's some feedback where it's just like, I mean, people leave a comment that's just negative and it goes to like the core of what the game is, and it's like, I don't know what to tell you other than I can't do anything about that,
Yeah. I think where I want to be envisioning myself with getting feedback is like being able to use it as data points, so that it's more, I'm seeing a trend of a bunch of people giving me the same type of feedback. That's like a directional finger in the wind, go look at that area to dive in more deeply on it. And like same thing with positive feedback, is not to let it like go to my head, but just use it as like a data point directionally to say, okay, these things seem like they're working well. People are enjoying those things. That's a good sign. But it's not like oh, that system's perfect. Kind of just trying to use it as what it is, and just collect data and help me adjust my mental model for the game, as opposed to like getting negative feedback, swinging the whole project left and right. I used to have a CEO who did that. We'd get a negative review on our product, and we'd just completely change how X, Y, and Z were working. I'm like, that feels like we're overreacting. Yeah. And now as running my own studio and being my own boss, I feel like sometimes I overreact to one piece of feedback, even if it is like really well thought out and really well organized. It's still just one person's opinion.
Right. Yeah, and I think, part of the consequence of having like a strong vision for the game too is that there's just people who aren't going to buy into that vision, and they're just, no matter what they do, they're just not going to like the game, and that's okay. I'm not making the game. I'm not making a game that has such mass appeal that literally everyone will play it and enjoy it. Like it's situated in a very specific genre. It has a very specific theme, and that's going to cause a lot of people not to like it, and that's okay. It's not a game for you, right? It's for the people that want to play this game. And then taking that approach, of the people who do enjoy the game or want to enjoy the game, how can you read their feedback to make the game even better? And even then, you might just have to disregard feedback and say like, that's just not actionable.
I like that a lot. I think there's a weird vibe in my head, and maybe a lot of us feel this way, of trying to make games that are more universal. And like, if you can instead go down the niche side of it and like make things that are specifically targeted to these people who like these sorts of games, and like align with how you like games, and all the like, we don't need to make big games. Like, the games don't have to have 1 million players for us to be insanely successful. 10,000 to 20,000 people, that game's almost a retirement plan. Like, at our scale as solo developers, like, that's an insanely successful game that would pay for the next 3 or 4 games to be made, right?
Yeah.
And I have to remember myself, like, that's not that many people on Steam. It's such a small base of players. Like, it doesn't have to be Balatro to be successful. Does he have to be I don't know, even smaller examples, but like a game with 500 reviews for me would be insanely successful.
Yeah,
versus,
I agree.
Like, trying to get to 1,000, it would be even more magnitudes of success. Like, and trying to focus in on that, so I'm not trying to make games for everybody, is a good mindset to be in, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. It's like, I have an ambitious goal for Alchemy Mortis to sell 50,000 copies, which is a stretch.
That would be so cool. I hope it does.
Thank you. I mean, we'll see, but like, I think setting the goal high, and then
get a mortgage at that rate.
Yeah, maybe. But setting the goal that high, and even if I only meet like 25% of expectations, well, that's still a huge success, right? Yeah. So, but even still, like you said, like 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 people is like nothing in terms of the overall Steam base.
Yeah.
Like it's a big number for an individual developer like you and me, but it's a small number compared to the audience that's available. And so I think it is actually more realistic than we think. And that's why I've kind of set that ambitious goal, is I think it's more realistic than even we would think it is. But, it's just, you got to keep the scale in mind too. It's like, there's so many people out there that will find your game appealing if you build it the right way. And, you can hit high numbers that aren't actually that high in the grand scheme of things.
It feels much more like we're playing with like percentages now, of like, if I can do this thing 5% better or that thing 10% better, all of a sudden that's going to like, and that's across hundreds of things. I'm not saying that it's like one thing 5% better, boom, I get my 50,000. It's like just hundreds of things a little bit better, all of a sudden get that game to be more playable, longer play time, better demo, better wish list, better next fest, better release, and like then that algorithm like will kick in, and you'll get to those trending pages and things like that can really take a game that is fun to play, that you enjoy, and have it be marketed to a bunch of people, because all of those small things feel like they're just a little bit better across the board.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, incremental progress. I mean, the whole idea of like compounding progress is true. Like, your efforts compound. You do 1% better every week for a year, and it's like, I mean, that's just huge gains, right? So
I like to think of it a bit, I play D&D every week, and I like to think a bit of it like rolling dice in my head, where right now it feels like I'm rolling a D20 and I need to be getting above a 17 for my like for a success rate to happen, because it's like maybe with Hex God it was even like 18. Like a bunch of the things I tried, they just got thrown out. But as I'm like getting better, that check is coming down and down and down. So there's going to be more times that I am rolling the dice on a mechanic, an idea, an art style, a way of implementing it. And if I can make that be more successful more often than not, I think that's when my like abilities start to scale in my head, where, oh, I can actually make a game that takes 300 hours of development, 200 hours of marketing production, and 100 hours of post-release support. And all of a sudden I've done a 600-hour game. Oh, I could do 3 600-hour games in a year and hit each of the next fest and stuff like that. If I can be doing things that more often than not are like panning out, being successful, and being like quote unquote like right decision in the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think and the other important thing too is like you have to be comparing yourself to your past versions of yourself, right? You can't be looking at games like,
it's so hard,
you know. Yeah, I mean, I do sometimes. I look at a Steam game that's like it was made by a solo developer and it got like 500,000 sales or whatever. Maybe not that high, but you know what I mean. And it's like
you see Schedule 1, you're like, shit.
Yeah, and that is ultimately like there. You should look at those kind of games and analyze what made them successful and see if there's anything to learn. But if you're just saying like, man, why can't I have that? Like that's just corrosive, right? You just got to stay focused on, am I doing better than the previous versions? Can I sell more copies than my previous game? Is my game more engaging than my previous game? And like, yeah, it may not rise to the level of being like a super indie hit, but you just keep making that incremental progress and it gets better and better. And I think that's really you just got to be comparing yourself to your past versions of yourself and not directly to other people who, you know, who also did 15 years of invisible work to create this masterpiece, and you didn't see the 50 games that they made that were garbage before that, you know?
I listen to a lot of podcasts with different like comedians and stuff. One of the ones I really like is Mike Birbiglia's podcast. He's been doing comedy for like 25 years, and only in the last like decade has he been like really successful in selling out big theaters and stuff like that. And I love hearing stories about those people, like people who it took a long time. Because I'm like, I feel like that's kind of the path I'm on, is like I'm going to be here for a while, and like within the next year I'm going to be having made enough games to be like profitable on a month-to-month basis. But like eventually, if I stick with it long enough, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to make some sort of hit indie games. It's just like being in the place of learning and looking at what I'm doing, and trying to be like thoughtful about those things, and not look up and kind of keep looking down as far as like looking at my immediate area of what I'm building and doing.
And that seems to be the norm too. Like even entrepreneurs, like your local plumber who's making 6 figures or $1 million plus a year owning his business. I mean, you don't see all the entrepreneurial failures he had before that. You know, it's like this is just the pattern of most successful people. Like there are actually relatively few people who are just prodigies, and the first thing they make is a super hit. There's usually like decades of prior work that goes into it and decades of prior failures, and that's the norm. And so the fact that, you know, we're making games that aren't doing as well as we hoped, or like we still have room to grow, that's the normal trajectory. That's totally, but it's hard to recognize that sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. It's so hard in the moment. Are there any role models that you look up to that you have never met? You know, online presences or different creators or game developers. Are there people you look up to that you've never met? Maybe not yes or no, but like who? I guess I'm asking who.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really frame like my thinking in terms of like I have these role models, you know.
Could just be people you look up to, or like you know. I mentioned Mike Birbiglia as one for me, but like another one would be Adam Savage. He was a Mythbuster. He has a YouTube channel. I just love the way he approaches the creative process of making things. And Day9 is another person on Twitch that I enjoy his communication style and his approach to problem solving and game design and stuff like that. Anybody come to mind like that?
No, not really. I don't like, I learn a lot from a lot of different people's experiences. You know, like there's stuff to learn from like big guys like Steve Jobs, you know, in the way that he ran Apple in the early days, but he delivered the iPhone to basically the entire world because he had a very strong vision. And again, he was working with constraints. I think it's a really interesting story to learn about, but, I think just generally like, hearing from all these creative and entrepreneurial people, I think I just look up to entrepreneurs generally because they all have a very similar trajectory, and hearing about their successes and their failures is just really informative. But yeah, I don't know if I would nail down any like specific person as like an inspiration for me. I just think that that whole world is just a gold mine of good information for anyone that's trying to pursue any creative endeavor or their own business or anything like that.
I like that a lot. I feel like that's that resonates me with a lot. It's just I feel like whenever I find a podcast or someone who is an entrepreneur, I'm like, ooh, this is good. But there's so many that I don't remember the names of the people for sure.
Yeah.
My final question for you is, how do you manage scope creep? That's the name of the podcast. It's we kind of been talking around the question, and I likely could predict your answer, but what is your process of managing scope creep as you look at past projects and kind of future projects?
Yeah, so managing scope creep is something that I haven't been historically great at, but it's again one of those skills that I'm developing. And so the way that I'm managing scope creep right now with Alchemortis is kind of what we touched on, which is that I'm setting distinctive dates for playtests to be available. I'm sticking with like the core mechanic of having these cards that have synergies on your auto battler grid, and just trying to squeeze as much out of that core mechanic as possible without adding a bunch of secondary or tertiary features. And then of course managing that those creative constraints, like I said, even with art, it's like you can kind of manage the scope creep of your art by limiting your canvas size and limiting your color palette, and that kind of, it's in Alchemortis, it's like the right mix of having enough room and enough colors to make something visually interesting without it taking an inordinate amount of time to draw just like one card. Because I want to have several hundred cards in the game, and so I need a tight process to get all that done before the game releases. And so, yeah, so managing the scope creep through those creative constraints, the deadlines, and then of course like collecting feedback early, I think is going to be really important, because I'm going to value the people who are going to tell me, hey, this game's going off the rails. You took a wrong turn somewhere, like bring it back, So if that ever happens, that feedback will be super valuable. So that's how I'm thinking about it currently. We'll see how it works out.
Beautiful. Well, I'm excited to someday have you back on to hear how it does work out, and to talk about how you got to 50,000 sales on Alchemortis. It'll be an exciting podcast to have for sure.
That'll be the day. I hope it happens.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. It was a blast to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was fun.
That was a cool conversation. I left that feeling like I could go and conquer the world as a game developer. Make sure you go check out Firebelley's YouTube channel, and make sure you wishlist Alchemortis. I hope you're half as excited as I am about this game. I'm absolutely going to be part of the playtest next week, and we'll be giving Jacob some feedback on this game, and just like enjoying this like really cool art style of having this negative space with these kind of really like catchy and poppy. Apparently it's only 8 colors, which absolutely fascinating to me. So if there's other people you want me to have on the podcast, let me know down in the comments below. If you made it this far, I'm thinking of doing maybe like a once a week episode where it's just me ranting and raving. I've been watching a lot of the Zach the Bold podcast recently, and I think I could enjoy the like sit down and I answer questions from you, or I give myself questions for the first couple episodes and kind of just like ranting around. So if you're interested, or if you have questions for that, leave them in the comments below, or email me the questions you have for game development. And the email you could use is aarimous@gmail.com. I'd be delighted to hear your questions and answer them live, or I guess live or pre-recorded on this podcast. Anyways, I've been Aarimous. Thank you so much for watching Scope Creepers. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.